I will go to Senator Murray.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Let me just start by saying that on January 27, President Trump made an unprecedented and illegal move to fire two of the EEOC commissioners, Jocelyn Samuels and Charlotte Burrows, without cause. In the EEOC's 60-year history, the president has never fired a commissioner before their term expired. Commissioner Lucas, in 2021, you actually criticized President Biden's move to fire the former general counsel, calling the EEOC a, quote, independent agency. Now that President Trump is in charge, all the talk about the EEOC's independence has disappeared. These illegal firings are yet another example of the very long list of ways President Trump is weaponizing and making independent agencies political. In this case, the one Americans actually rely on for justice when they face discrimination at work. I led a letter to President Trump pressing him to reinstate Commissioner Samuels and Burrows. I urge my colleagues to join me in opposing any nominations to the EEOC until President Trump does that. Now, Commissioner, let me start with you on questions. Under President Trump, the EEOC has moved to dismiss cases they had previously agreed on by a majority vote to litigate. For example, the Commission recently dismissed a case, Lush Cosmetics, where the EEOC itself had alleged that a manager groped an employee, asked an employee for sex, commented on employees' breasts, tried to engage employees in sexual discussions, and used sexual profanities. Commissioner Lucas, was it your decision to dismiss that case?
Thank you for the question, Senator, and for the opportunity to acknowledge my prior tweet and to note that I was wrong at that time. At the time that I indicated
I'm sorry, you're referring back to the tweet about the agency?
The independence of the agency, and yes, that's directly relevant to your question because the agency is an executive branch agency.
Okay,
but at the time that I indicated that, I was not aware of the long record that the agency had taken that position. And therefore, it's important for, as an executive agency, us to follow the president when he directs us in an executive order to defend women's rights and to refer to individuals solely by their biological pronouns and to defend biological
Can you
reality.
answer the question on the dismissing the case? You were acting chair of the commission when Lush Cosmetics.
Yes.
Was it your decision to drop the case?
It was my decision, in consultation with our career staff, unanimous decision of the career staff, that it was impossible to both comply with the president's executive order as an executive branch agency and also zealously defend the workers who we had brought the case on behalf. We could not balance both of those interests, and therefore we gave them an opportunity to intervene, and the case proceeds forward with those workers taking the position on their own.
Well, I just want to be clear. What you're saying is that when an employee is groped, propositioned for sex, and called abject slurs at work, the EEOC will do absolutely nothing to enforce anti-discrimination laws if that employee happens to be non-binary or otherwise doesn't conform to this administration's ideas about gender. Is that correct?
Respectfully, I disagree with that conclusion, Senator. What I am saying,
I don't know what conclusion we come to other than that with that decision.
as an executive branch agency, we are complying with the executive orders. Our doors, however, are open to all workers as statutorily required. We accept all charges, regardless of how they are framed or what they are indicated. And I've made clear in repeated statements that anyone can bring a charge. They will be treated professionally, and they will receive.
I'll just say this for the committee, and I just have a few seconds left. It shouldn't matter what someone's gender identity is. If they are harassed at work, they should be able to get the justice they are entitled to under the law. I just have a few seconds left. I want to ask you about, in December 2022, Congress passed my Pregnant Workers Fairness Act, which requires employers to provide reasonable accommodations to employees' limitations related to pregnancy, childbirth, or related medical conditions. Most reasonable people would agree that recovering from needed abortion care is a condition that is related to pregnancy. You voted against PFWA's implementing regulations, and you've indicated that you intend to revise those regulations to narrow the situations the law covers. Do you agree that PFWFA covers miscarriage-related accommodations?
Senator, I do agree that it covers miscarriage related because that would be related to a childbirth. My vote to disagree with the implementing regulations came at it as a disappointment to me. I advocated for the PWFA. I think it was an important bipartisan law.
Yes.
But it is important that the commission act with the scope of authority that Congress gave us, and we are not Congress. That rule, however, strove to displace Congress and to rewrite the rule in ways that exceeded our authority.
Commissioner Lucas, let me just say, and I am out of time, I recognize that. If it's necessary to protect a woman's health or her fertility or a fatal fetal abnormality, the law should cover that. And I find it really concerning that the commission doesn't agree with that interpretation of the law as we passed. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Husted.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Commissioner Lucas, I understand you're a native of Strongsville, Ohio, so I know the people there are very proud of your work.
Thank you, Mr. Hoyer. I now recognize the ranking member of the full committee, Ranking Member Delora, for her opening remarks.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Joyce, and thank you, Ranking Member Hoyer, for holding this vital hearing. Director Vogt, good afternoon. Welcome back to the House Appropriations Committee, and thank you for appearing before us today. The Office of Management and Budget is perhaps the most critical agency that most people have never heard of. I know you know this well, Mr. Vogt, but that is no excuse to thwart and otherwise ignore the law. In the United States of America, if you disagree with a law, you have every right to urge that that law be changed. You can petition or meet with lawmakers, and you can wage a campaign in the court of public opinion. You can run to become a lawmaker yourself. What disagreement with the law does not confer is license to ignore the law, to flagrantly violate the law, and to act as though you are completely above the law. This administration, instead of being laser focused on the cost of living crisis, it is actually making that cost of living crisis worse. And it has put billionaires in charge of the government and has filled the ranks of civil servants with political allies. For the sake of eliminating accountability and cutting taxes for billionaires, this administration is unlawfully impounding or stealing funds and dismantling agencies, depriving the American people of the programs and services which Congress has created, authorized, and appropriated funds for. You posit yourself a defender of everyday Americans and a champion for restoring an imagined version of America you consider morally and virtuously superior to the country we actually live in. I do not believe your actions, which are inflicting direct harm on the people you claim to support, is in any way reflective of righteous values or of America's constitutional tradition. You support autocracy, not restrained or limited government. You have shown nothing but utter disregard and disrespect for this committee, for Congress as a whole, and for the laws that we have enacted. When the president named you to retake this position, he said that you would, quote, return self-governance to the people, end quote. Yet, you have demonstrated contempt for American taxpayers by gleefully ignoring lawful requirements to provide them and their elected representatives in Congress the most basic information as to how their tax dollars are being spent. During your current tenure, the president has yet to submit a full budget. When it finally arrives, you will have led the most delayed presidential transition for any OMB in history. Despite your shortcomings at OMB, you fashion yourself the acting head of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. You have been very busy there, But so far, your biggest achievement has been increasing at least 45 million Americans' credit card bills by hundreds of dollars annually by reinstating predatory fees. You have ignored requests from this Congress for information. You stood up the Republican leadership of this committee, several of whom are here today. And you have mocked the Government Accountability Office for affirming what everyone in this room understands to be true. You are unlawfully impounding or stealing congressionally appropriated funds. Direct vote, the Constitution confers the power of the purse, the power to make appropriations in law, to the Congress. It is right there. It's Article 1, Section 9, Clause 7. The courts have repeatedly ruled that there is no inherent authority for the president to impound funds. The late Justice Antonin Scalia, not a liberal torchbearer, proudly proclaimed, as much in reference to the Supreme Court's decision in Train versus City of New York. Justice Kavanaugh, then for the D.C. Circuit, wrote, and I quote, "Even the president does not have unilateral authority to refuse to spend." And Chief Justice Roberts, during his time at the White House counsel's office, stated, and I quote, "No area seems more clearly the province of Congress than the power of the purse." Let me just go back to our founding fathers on the Congress's power of the purse, to Alexander Hamilton. And I quote, "Where the purse is lodged in one branch and the sword in another, there can be no danger." You are not just on thin legal footing, Direct Vote. You are living in a legal and historical fiction. You envision a king unbound by laws who rules by decree, who accepts lavish gifts from foreign governments, who fills public offices with ultra-wealthy and political allies, and who expels opposition and crushes dissent. This view of presidential authority could not be more un-American and more dangerous to our constitutional order. You contend that there are over 200 years of historical practice to support your position. This is a lie and fiction. I have reviewed your pseudo-history, and nearly every instance you claim supports your position of a president king, unbound by the American system of checks and balances, is either irrelevant or an exercise of discretion explicitly granted by the Congress in law. Presidential impoundment power is a myth. You do not just have to take my word for it. The Constitution, the courts, Government Accountability Office, and the American history would tell us you are breaking the law. Through the OMB funding freeze, which touched communities nationwide, you have attempted to seize control of the government and impound funds far beyond what is permitted by law. And in venues across the country, the courts have broadly, unequivocally told you, quote, "No, you do not have the authority. You cannot unfreeze unilaterally funding across the government that has been appropriated by the Congress." The courts are making clear that you grossly overstepped your authority. You have had your day in court, and the courts have rebuked you. They have said no, no, and no. None of this is surprising. Project 2025, which you co-authored, laid out your blueprint for concentrating absolute power, not just in the White House, but in your own hands. Your colleagues, secretaries, and heads of major agencies have testified before us in the last several weeks to exactly this point. Your office has promoted your own goals over and above the people President Trump has handpicked to run his administration. You have also said that you want to traumatize federal employees, civil servants, as if inflicting trauma and creating a culture of fear and doubt will somehow make this government more efficient. Mr. Vogt, be honest. This is never about government efficiency. In fact, an efficient government, a government that capably serves the American people and proves good government is achievable, is what you fear the most. You want a government so broken, so dysfunctional, so starved of resources, so full of incompetent political lackeys and bereft of experts and professionals that its departments and agencies cannot feasibly achieve the goals and the missions to which they are lawfully directed. Your goal is privatization, for the biggest companies to have unchecked power, for an economy that does not work for the middle class, for working and vulnerable families. You want the American people to have no one to turn to but to the billionaires and the corporation this administration has put in charge. Waste, fraud, and abuse are not the targets of this administration. They are your primary objectives. I thank you, and I thank the chair for his indulgence, and we look forward to your testimony. I yield back.
Why, thank you, Ranking Member Delora.